The gravity stabilizers on Orbital Station 4 groaned like a dying beast, a low-frequency vibration that rattled the teeth of anyone unfortunate enough to work in the sub-levels. Reed Carter did not mind the noise. The noise meant the station was still holding together, fighting the drag of the atmosphere below and the cold vacuum above. It was the silence he hated. Silence meant a seal had blown, a turbine had seized, or a life had ended. Reed adjusted the strap of his sensor rig, wiping a smear of grease from his forehead with a sleeve that had been gray once but was now a map of stains. He was a hazard inspector, a title that sounded official but mostly involved crawling into ducts too small for drones and patching pipes that should have been replaced 10 years ago. It was not glorious work, but it paid for a bunk in the crew quarters and enough synthetic whiskey to drown out the dreams. He paused at a viewport near the tertiary airlock, looking down at the blue-white curve of Earth. It looked peaceful from up here, a marble of cloud and ocean. You could almost forget the political firestorms burning across the continents, or the uneasy eyes turned toward the stars. Almost. A shadow fell across the sunlight, blocking the view. A ship drifted past, massive and unsettling. It did not have the harsh angles and rivets of human engineering. It looked grown, a seamless carapace-like hull that shimmered with an iridescent sheen, pulsing rhythmically as if it were breathing. A Serath cruiser. Reed felt the familiar tightening in his chest, a mixture of awe and deep, primal revulsion. The Serath Dominion. They had appeared in the solar system 5 years ago, bringing technology that made human science look like banging rocks together. They claimed to be peaceful explorers, allies against the darker things lurking in the galactic deep, but their ships looked like predators, and their armored envoys moved with a fluid, lethal grace that made the hairs on Reed's neck stand up. He turned away from the window, checking his datapad. He had a scheduled inspection at the main arrival concourse in 1 hour. Routine structural integrity check, low risk, easy money. His hand trembled slightly as he holstered the pad. He clenched his fist, forcing the tremor to stop. It had been 3 years since Chicago, since the building collapse that had ended his career as a combat medic and firefighter. 3 years since he had crawled into the rubble, listening to the crying of a trapped child, promising her he was coming. He remembered the dust choking his throat. He remembered the weight of the concrete shifting. He remembered reaching for a small hand, fingers brushing against his. Just as the secondary collapse brought the ceiling down, he had failed. The silence that followed that collapse was the silence that woke him up sweating 3 nights a week. He avoided deep relationships now. He kept his conversations light, his humor dry, and his expectations low. If you did not let anyone in, you could not let them down. If you did not try to save the world, you did not have to watch it break. The commissary on level 7 was crowded with dock workers, transit pilots, and travelers waiting for connecting shuttles. The air smelled of recycled ozone and fried protein paste. Reed slid into a plastic booth opposite Val, a logistics officer with a sharp tongue and a soft spot for strays like him. "You look like you wrestled a hydraulic pump and lost," Val said, stabbing a fork into her lunch tray. Reed grinned, a lopsided expression that crinkled the scars around his eyes. "The pump had a reach advantage," he said, "but I talked it down, used my charm." Val snorted. "Your charm is about as effective as a screen door on a submarine." "Reed, speaking of charm, did you see the security alert? Level 1 is on lockdown for some VIP arrival." "I saw the cruiser," Reed said, stealing a fry from her tray. "Big one. Looked like a bruised plum floating in space." Val lowered her voice, leaning in. "Rumor is it is not just an ambassador this time. They say it is high blood, Royalty. Maybe a princess coming to inspect the primitive monkeys. Reed chewed the fry. Unimpressed. Great. Just what we need. More shimmering giants looking down their noses at us while we scrub their docking clamps. I hope she brings a tip. You are hopeless, Val said, shaking her head but smiling. One day, Carter, you are going to meet a nice girl, settle down, and stop pretending you are a bitter old man. Maybe you will fall for this alien princess. Reed laughed, a dry, rasping sound. Sure. Val, that is exactly my type. High maintenance, armored scales, and a tendency to vaporize people who disagree with her. I will be sure to ask for her number if I see her. Val rolled her eyes. Just be careful at the concourse. Security is tight. They are jumpy. The Sarath make everyone nervous. I am always careful, Reed said, sliding out of the booth. Being careful is the only thing I am good at anymore. He walked away, throwing a wave over his shoulder. But the smile faded the moment his back was turned. He was not careful. He was cowardly. There was a difference, and he knew it intimately. The main arrival concourse was a cathedral of glass and steel, spanning the entire width of the station's central spindle. Sunlight streamed through the blast-shielded viewports, illuminating the thousands of travelers moving in chaotic streams. It was a hub of noise. Announcements in 6 languages, the drone of cargo lifters, the chatter of families reunited. Reed moved along the upper maintenance gantry, checking the stress sensors welded to the primary support beams. He wore his high-visibility vest and carried a heavy bag of diagnostic tools. Below him, the crowd was a shifting mosaic of humanity. Security was indeed tight. He saw teams of station tactical officers moving in grid patterns, their rifles low but ready. Mixed in with them were the Sarath guards, 7 feet tall, encased in bioarmor that shifted color from pearl white to deep violet depending on the light. They stood like statues, their faces hidden behind opaque, flowing helms. Reed focused on his work, calibrating a sensor that was reading a .02 variance in vibration. It was within tolerance, but he adjusted it anyway. He liked things precise. Movement caught his eye near the observation deck below. Amidst the gray and blue jumpsuits of the station workers and the synthetic fabrics of the travelers, a woman stood out. She was dressed simply in a traveler's cloak and tunic, shades of muted brown. But she moved with a posture that cut through the crowd like the prow of a ship. She was holding the hand of a small child, a girl no older than 6. Reed paused, wiping sweat from his brow. They looked like normal refugees or tourists, but something was off. The woman's head was constantly turning, scanning the perimeter not with fear but with tactical precision. As she turned, the light caught her eyes. They were not human eyes, even from this distance. Reed saw them flash, bright, luminescent amber with a vertical pupil that dilated and contracted in a way that had nothing to do with the light levels. Contacts, implants, or Sarath in disguise. The little girl tugged at the woman's hand, pointing excitedly at a passing cargo drone that buzzed overhead like a giant bumblebee. The woman leaned down, whispering something, her hand resting protectively on the girl's shoulder. It was a universal gesture, a mother guarding her cub. Reed felt a pang of sympathy. It did not matter if they were alien or human. A mother trying to get her kid through a crowded space was a struggle he respected. He turned back to the sensor, tightening a bolt. When he looked down again, the dynamic had shifted. The woman was distracted by a station security officer asking to see her identification. She was holding out a data pad, her body language tense. In that brief moment of distraction, the little girl had slipped away. The child was wandering toward the massive structural joint where the concourse floor met the transparent aluminum of the outer wall. She was chasing the reflection of the cargo drone in the glass, giggling. Reed frowned. That area was supposed to be clear for the VIP arrival. He leaned over the railing. "Hey, kid," he muttered to himself. "Turn around." The girl reached the wall, pressing her small hands against the glass. Just behind her, tucked into the shadow of a support strut, Reed saw it. It was a small device, no larger than a lunchbox, attached magnetically to the structural joint. It was dark gray, blending perfectly with the metal, but the casing was vibrating. A faint, high-pitched whine reached Reed's ears, cutting through the ambient noise of the station. Reed froze. He knew that sound. He had heard it in war zones and in controlled demolitions. It was the whine of a capacitor charging for a shaped discharge. It was not a power coupling. It was a bomb. And the little girl was standing 2 feet from it. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked into Reed's brain. His first instinct, the one he had cultivated for 3 years, screamed at him to drop flat, to cover his head, to survive. But then he saw the girl turn, her eyes wide and confused, looking for her mother. She looked terrified. The memory of Chicago superimposed itself over the concourse, the dust, the dark, the crying. No, not this time. Reed did not think. He did not calculate the odds. He vaulted over the railing of the maintenance gantry. "Get down!" he roared, his voice tearing from his throat, raw and loud enough to turn heads 300 feet away. He dropped 15 feet, landing on a cargo crate with a bone-jarring impact that rolled him forward. He scrambled to his feet and sprinted. He was 50 feet away. The capacitor whine was rising, a scream climbing toward a crescendo. The mother turned. She saw Reed sprinting toward her child. She saw the device. Her eyes went wide, shifting from amber to a blinding white in pure terror. She lunged, but she was too far. The security officer grabbed her arm, thinking she was fleeing. Reed threw himself forward, his boots skidding on the polished floor. He did not try to reach the bomb. He reached for the girl. He hit her at a dead run, wrapping his arms around her small body and tackling her away from the wall. He curled himself around her, tucking her head into his chest, presenting his back to the structural joint. He shouted a single word. "Now." The world turned white. The sound was not a noise. It was a physical blow that hammered Reed into the floor. The concourse shuddered. The structural joint vaporized. Then came the wind. The explosion had blown the viewport out. The vacuum of space, cold and infinite, instantly roared into the station, dragging everything that was not bolted down toward the void. Gravity flickers. The artificial gravity generators whined in protest, failing for a terrifying second before kicking back in. Reed slid across the floor, debris raining down around him like shrapnel hail. He slammed his boots into the deck, activating the magnetic locks in his soles, standard issue for hazard inspections. They held, just barely. He was an anchor in a river of chaos. The air howled past him, stripping the heat from the room, turning the moisture in the air to instant ice fog. Glass shards, metal fragments, and luggage flew past him into the dark. Reed squeezed his eyes shut, screaming through his gritted teeth as a piece of twisted metal scored a deep gash across his shoulder. He curled tighter around the girl. She was screaming too, a thin, high sound that was quickly being swallowed by the thinning atmosphere. "Hold on," he shouted into her hair. "I have got you." Emergency shutters slammed down from the ceiling 50 feet away, sealing the breach section off from the rest of the concourse. The wind died instantly. The silence returned, heavier than before. Reed gasped, the air thin and freezing. He unlocked his boots and rolled onto his back, pulling the girl with him. She was limp. Reed sat up, ignoring the blood soaking the back of his shirt. He looked at the child. She was pale, her lips turning blue. A shard of glass had punctured the shoulder of her tunic, and the pressure drop had done the rest. Her eyes were closed. She was not breathing. "No," Reed whispered. "No, no, no." He ripped the emergency kit from his belt. His hands, usually steady, were shaking violently. He forced them to obey. He tore open her tunic. There was a small puncture wound near her collarbone. It was bubbling pink froth, lung puncture. Reed grabbed a tube of biosealant gel. He jammed the nozzle into the wound and squeezed the trigger. The blue foam expanded, sealing the hole instantly. He put his ear to her chest. "No heartbeat. Come on," he growled. He interlaced his fingers and placed them on her sternum. She was so small. He had to be careful. Too hard and he would break her ribs. Too soft and she would stay dead. He began compressions. 1, 2, 3, 4. The rhythm took over. It was the only thing in the universe. The station alarms were blaring. Security teams were shouting. But Reed heard nothing but his own counting. 1, 2, 3, 4. "Breathe, damn it," he pleaded, tears blurring his vision. "Do not do this to me, not again, please." He tilted her head back, pinched her nose, and breathed into her mouth. Her chest rose. He waited. No exhale. Back to compressions. 1, 2, 3, 4. His arms burned. His own blood was dripping onto the floor, pooling around his knees, and he felt lightheaded from the hypoxia. Darkness clawed at the edges of his vision. "I am not letting you go," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I am not letting you go." He breathed for her again. Suddenly, her chest hitched. A ragged, wet cough erupted from her small body. She gasped, sucking in a desperate lungful of thin air. Her eyes snapped open, bright, swirling violet. She whimpered, reaching out blindly. Her hand found Reed's shirt and gripped it with surprising strength. Reed collapsed back on his heels, his chest heaving. He put a hand on her forehead, brushing away the dust. She was alive. She was breathing. A sob tore out of his throat, a mixture of laugh and cry that hurt his ribs. He sat there in the wreckage, shaking uncontrollably, holding the alien child's hand while the world spun around them. Movement, fast and heavy. Reed looked up. A wall of iridescent armor surrounded them. Sarath guards, weapons raised, their helmets glowing with targeting lasers. They formed a perimeter, pushing back the human security teams who were trying to advance. In the center of the circle, the woman, the mother, fell to her knees. The disguise technology she had been wearing flickered and died. The dull brown cloak dissolved into digital mist, revealing the truth beneath. She was tall, terrifyingly beautiful, and undeniably alien. Her skin was the color of moonlight on snow, faint geometric patterns glowing softly beneath the surface. She wore armor that looked like spun silver and hardened glass, elegant and lethal. A circlet of floating crystalline shards hovered above her brow. Princess Lyra of the Sarath Dominion. She ignored the guards. She ignored the devastation. She crawled across the debris, her movements frantic, uncoordinated by fear. She reached them. Her hands hovered over the girl, trembling violently, as scanners in her gauntlets washed blue light over the child's body. "Stable," a computerized voice whispered from her armor. "Critical danger past." The princess let out a sound that was half scream, half prayer. She scooped the child up, pulling her against the breastplate of her armor, rocking back and forth. Reed watched, dazed, his vision tunneling. He tried to stand up, but his legs refused to work. He slumped against a piece of fallen beam. Lyra looked up, Her eyes were huge, the pupils blown wide, swimming with colors Reed had no names for. They locked onto his. She saw the blood on his shirt. She saw the sealant gel on her daughter's chest. She saw the way his hands were still shaking. She moved, faster than a human could. In a blink, she was in front of him. She did not pull away. She leaned forward, closing the distance, and pressed her forehead against his. It was not a human gesture. It was something older, more primal. Reed gasped. Where their skin touched, a shockwave of heat rushed through him. It was not just warmth. It was a sensation of pure, unfiltered emotion. He felt her terror, her relief, and a gratitude so profound it felt like a physical weight. It was intimate, intrusive, and overwhelming. "You saved my child," she whispered. Her voice was melodic, trembling with the aftershocks of panic. "You saved my child." Reed could not speak. He could only stare into those shifting, impossible eyes. He saw himself reflected in them, a dirty, bleeding, broken man who had finally, for once, not failed. There was a charged silence between them, a bubble of connection that excluded the shouting guards and the blaring alarms. For 3 seconds, Reed Carter and Princess Elira were the only two people in the universe. He saw the fear behind the royalty. She saw the stubbornness behind the ruin. Then, the bubble burst. Sarath guards seized Elira by the shoulders, pulling her back. "Highness, we must evacuate. The sector is not secure." "No!" Elira shouted, reaching back toward Reed. Her hand stretched out, fingers splayed. Human security teams swarmed Reed. Rough hands grabbed his arms, hauling him up. "Get him back!" a tactical officer barked. "Isolate him! He was right next to the device." "Wait," Reed mumbled, his tongue feeling thick. I just caught her." "Suspect is in custody. Move!" They dragged him away. Reed stumbled, his feet dragging on the floor. He looked back. Elira was fighting her guards, her eyes still locked on him. She was screaming orders, pointing at him. But the roar of the arriving extraction shuttle drowned her out. The last thing Reed saw before they shoved him through the blast doors was the princess of the Sarath Dominion, clutching her daughter to her chest, staring at him as if she wanted to burn his face into her memory. The interrogation room was cold. It smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee. Reed sat on a metal chair, stripped to the waist, a bandage taped hastily over the gash on his shoulder. He had been there for 3 hours. "So, let us go over it again," the intelligence officer said. He was a thin man with watery eyes and a badge that said, "Special Diplomatic Corps." "You were assigned to the gantries, then why did you descend to the floor level?" Reed sighed, leaning his head back. "I told you, I saw the kid, I saw the bomb, and you recognized a shaped charge by sight, an obscure modification of a mining explosive? That is impressive. Mr. Carter, or should I say, Sergeant Carter." "Ex-sergeant," Reed muttered. "And yes, I know what a bomb looks like. It is the thing that goes boom." The officer did not smile. "You were the only one close enough to react. You shielded the alien child. You administered medical aid using station supplies when it is almost as if you rehearsed it." Reed laughed, a hollow, angry sound. "Yeah, I rehearsed blowing myself up. Look, check the security feeds. Check the bioscans. I saved her life. Or you set the stage for a hero moment to infiltrate their inner circle," the officer suggested softly. Reed stared at him. "You are out of your mind." The door opened. A senior officer stuck his head in. "Let him go." The intelligence officer frowned. "Sir, let him go." The Sarath ambassador just filed a formal demand. They confirmed the explosive signature matches a terrorist cell we have been tracking. Carter is clear and the princess is asking for him. The officer looked at Reed with new eyes, suspicion mixed with fear. "Asking for him?" She wants the name of the man who saved the air. The room went silent. Reed stood up, wincing as his shoulder pulled. Can I go now? I have a shift in 12 hours. The senior officer nodded slowly. Get out of here, Carter. But do not leave the station. This is not over. Reed grabbed his shirt, ruined, blood stiff, and walked out. He made it back to his quarters in a daze. The small room was dark, illuminated only by the blinking red light of the message terminal. He ignored it. He sat on the edge of his bunk, staring at his hands. They were clean now, scrubbed pink in the decon showers, but he could still feel the phantom sensation of the little girl's ribs under his fingers. He could still feel the frantic rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 4. He lay back, staring at the ceiling rivets. He expected the nightmares to come. He expected the dust of Chicago. But when he closed his eyes, he did not see the falling building. He saw amber eyes. He felt the cool, hard surface of living armor against his skin. He felt the pressure of a forehead resting against his, a telepathic jolt of pure, terrified gratitude. You saved my child. Reed brought his hand up, touching his own forehead where she had touched him. The skin felt strange there, tingling. He let out a long, shaky breath in the darkness. He was just a hazard inspector. She was royalty from a civilization that could turn Earth into glass. It was a fluke, a collision of worlds that should never have touched. He would wake up tomorrow, go to work, and she would be a headline on the news feeds. But as he drifted into an uneasy sleep, the image of her face, fierce, beautiful, and vulnerable, burned behind his eyelids. And deep in his gut, Reed Carter knew with absolute certainty that the officer was right about one thing. This was not over. 3 days after the explosion, the silence of Reed Carter's quarters was louder than the concourse had ever been. He sat on the edge of his bunk, staring at a stain on the metallic floor plating, a cup of lukewarm synthetic coffee forgotten in his hand. The station was trying to return to normal. That was the official directive. Resume standard operations. But Reed could feel the tension vibrating through the deck plates. The air recyclers hummed with a frantic energy, and the usual chatter in the corridors was hushed, replaced by suspicious glances and quickened paces. He had tried to go back to work. Yesterday, he had inspected a pressure valve on level 6. He had stared at the gauge for 20 minutes, but instead of reading the pressure variance, his mind had replayed the image of the structural joint dissolving. He saw the flash of white. He felt the vacuum tearing at his clothes. And then, inevitably, the memory shifted. The cold terror of the vacuum was replaced by the searing heat of a forehead pressing against his. You saved my child. The voice was not in his ears. It was stuck in the base of his skull, resonating like a struck bell. Reed rubbed his face with his free hand, feeling the rough stubble. He had not slept more than 2 hours at a time. Every time he drifted off, he was back in the debris. But the face of the child kept changing. Sometimes it was the alien girl with the violet eyes. Sometimes it was the human girl from Chicago covered in dust, slipping through his fingers. He stood up and walked to the wall screen, tapping the activation stud. The newsfeed flickered to life. A polished anchor with a smile that did not reach her eyes was speaking over footage of the wrecked concourse. Official report from Station Command confirms that the incident was caused by a catastrophic failure in a volatile cargo container, the anchor said smoothly. While tragic, rumors of an attack are unsubstantiated. The station remains secure. In other news, trade negotiations with the outer colonies are stalling due to. Reed slapped the stud, killing the feed. Lies. He knew what a volatile cargo failure looked like. It pushed outward. It was messy. The blast on the concourse had been surgical. It was a shaped charge designed to shear structural supports. It was an assassination attempt, and everyone in charge was pretending it was a shipping error. He paced the small room. Why the cover-up? If the Serath princess had been the target, why were the humans lying? Unless they were involved, or unless they were so terrified of the Serath reaction that they were trying to sweep the whole thing under the rug before the aliens noticed. Reed let out a bitter laugh. Before they noticed. Elira had noticed. She had looked right at him. Through him, with eyes that saw everything. His door chime buzzed. Reed froze. He was not on the schedule for today. He had called in sick, claiming radiation sickness from a leak, a lie his supervisor had accepted with suspicious ease. "Carter," a voice came through the intercom. "Security? Open up." Reed hesitated, then hit the release. The door slid open. 2 officers stood there. They were not the usual station rent-a-cops. These were United Earth Navy personnel, their uniforms crisp, their faces grim. "Mr. Carter," the one on the left said. He did not ask. He stated. "That is me," Reed said, leaning against the doorframe, trying to look more relaxed than he felt. "Unless I owe back taxes. I do not see why the Navy is making house calls." "You are needed for a supplementary debriefing," the officer said. "Command and control." "Now." Reed frowned. "I already told the suits everything. I saw the kid. I grabbed the kid. The wall blew up. End of story." The officer stepped forward. His hand did not touch his sidearm, but the threat was there in the shift of his weight. "It is not a request. Carter, come with us." Reed looked at them, then shrugged. He grabbed his jacket from the hook. "Fine. But if I miss lunch, I am charging the Navy for the sandwich." They did not laugh. They flanked him, escorting him down the corridor with a rigidity that screamed prisoner transfer rather than witness interview. As they moved toward the central lift, Reed noticed the station was trembling. It was subtle at first, just a rattle in the wall panels, but it grew steadily. It was not the mechanical vibration of the gravity stabilizers. This was deeper. It felt like the station was shivering in the presence of something massive. They reached the observation deck on the command level. The blast shutters were open. Reed stopped dead. The officers did not push him. They were staring too. The sun was gone, or rather, it was eclipsed, hanging in the void above Earth, casting a shadow that swallowed the station whole. Was a fleet. They were not the blocky utilitarian wedges of the human alliance. These ships were curves and flowing lines, their hulls shimmering with a biological iridescence that shifted from deep purple to blood red. They looked like deep-sea leviathans that had learned to swim through the stars. There were dozens of them, frigates, destroyers, and carriers, moving in a formation that was less like a military parade and more like a predator circling its prey. At the center of the formation, a tear in space was still knitting itself shut, a hyperspace gate of immense proportions. From the fading rift, a final vessel descended. It was the size of a city, its hull rippled with bioluminescent patterns that seemed to pulse in time with Reed's own heartbeat. It was beautiful, terrifying, and undeniably lethal, a Serath flagship. Reed felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. "I do not think they are here for the duty-free shop," he muttered. The officer grabbed his arm, his grip hard. "Move. The Admiral is waiting." Command and control was a chaotic hive of shouting voices and flashing tactical displays. Officers were running between consoles, faces pale. The main screen dominated the room, showing a magnified view of the Serath flagship. "Weapon systems active," a tactical officer shouted. "They are locking onto everything. They have target locks on the orbital defense grid, the station, And the lunar outposts. Reed was shoved into a corner near the Admiral's podium. Admiral Vance, a gray-haired man who looked like he had aged 10 years in the last 10 minutes, was screaming into a headset. "I do not care what the protocol is. Get me a line to their high command. Tell them this is a misunderstanding." "Sir," the comms officer turned, voice trembling. "They are overriding our frequencies. They are broadcasting on all channels. Global saturation. Put it on screen." Vance barked. The tactical map vanished. In its place, a face appeared. It was not a human face. It was a Sarath commander. His skin was darker than Elira's, a deep indigo, and his armor was jagged, growing from his shoulders like spikes of obsidian. His eyes were burning gold, residents of Earth. The commander's voice boomed, translated instantly by the station's AI. It was a deep, resonant sound that seemed to vibrate the floorboards. "I am High Warlord Kael'thas of the Sarath Dominion. We have arrived to secure the safety of the royal bloodline." The room went deathly silent. "An attack was made upon the heir to the eternal throne within your territory." The warlord continued. "Your failure to protect the innocent is noted. However, the Dominion acknowledges the singular action of the one who stood against the darkness." Reed felt the blood drain from his face. He took a step back, looking for an exit that did not exist. "We demand the immediate transfer of the human hero of the royal bloodline incident," the warlord declared. "He has spilled his blood to save the daughter of the stars. By the ancient rites, he is ours to claim. Ours to claim." The words hung in the air like a sentence. A picture flashed up on the screen next to the warlord's terrifying face. It was a grainy security capture from the concourse. It showed Reed, bloody and desperate, clutching the little girl to his chest amidst the wreckage. Below the image, in bold alien script and English translation, was his name. Reed Carter. Reed felt every eye in the command center turn toward him. The Admiral turned slowly, his expression a mix of relief and calculation. Panic erupted in the room, but it was a different kind of panic now. It was political. "They want a hostage?" an aide whispered loudly. "He is not a hostage," another argued. "Did you hear him? He said claim. It is some kind of honor thing, or a tribunal. If we refuse?" Vance asked the tactical officer. "Sir," the tactical officer swallowed hard, "if we refuse looking at their energy output, they will likely vaporize the station as a warning shot." Vance looked at Reed. Reed held up his hands. "Whoa. Hold on. I did not sign up for this. I inspect pipes. I do not do..." "Whatever this is," Vance walked over to him. The Admiral was sweating. "Carter, listen to me. You are going to go with them." "Like hell I am," Reed snapped. "Did you see that guy? He looks like he eats gravel for breakfast. They think I am a hero now, but 5 minutes alone with me and they will realize I am just a guy who panicked and got lucky. Then they will space me." "This is not a debate," Vance hissed. "Look out the window, son. That is an invasion fleet. They are holding a gun to the head of the entire planet. They want you. If giving them you buys us time to figure out what is going on, then you are going." Reed looked at the screen again. The Sarath ships were drifting closer. He thought of the little girl. He thought of Elira. "Are they safe?" Reed asked quietly. "The princess and the kid?" Vance blinked, surprised by the question. "Intelligence suggests they are aboard the flagship. They were evacuated immediately after the blast." Reed looked down at his boots. He was trapped. If he stayed, he was the reason Earth got glassed. If he went, he was walking into a nest of vipers with nothing but a wrench and a bad attitude. "Fine," Reed said, his voice dry. "But if I get probed, I am filing a union grievance." Vance did not smile. He gestured to the security team. Get him to Bay 4. The Sarath shuttle is already docking. The walk to Bay 4 was a blur. Security hustled him through the corridors, clearing a path through the gathered crowds. People were staring at him. Some cheered, shouting his name. Others looked at him with fear, as if he were a bomb about to go off. He checked his reflection in a passing glass panel. He looked like a wreck. His jacket was torn, his shirt was wrinkled, and he had dark circles under his eyes. Great, he muttered. I am being recalled by customer service, and I am not even in the original packaging. The guard next to him glanced over. Shut up, Carter. Reed grinned, but it was brittle, just trying to lighten the mood. You guys are very tense. You should try yoga, or surrendering to our new alien overlords. I hear the dental plan is amazing. Shut up. They reached the airlock. The heavy blast doors were open. Beyond them, the docking tube was not the standard gray plastic. It was lined with a translucent, membrane-like material that pulsed with soft light. A delegation was waiting. Human diplomats in expensive suits stood on one side, looking terrified. On the other side stood 4 Sarath guards, and in the middle, standing tall and radiant, was Elira. Reed's breath hitched. She was not the dusty traveler in the tunic anymore. She was transformed. She wore full ceremonial armor, plates of white and gold that seemed to grow naturally over her form. A high collar framed her face, and a cloak of shimmering light flowed from her shoulders. She looked powerful. She looked dangerous. She looked like a queen. But then her eyes met his. The formality cracked, just for a second. Her pupils dilated, the amber shifting to a warm honey color. She took a step forward, ignoring the diplomats who were trying to read her a prepared statement. Reed Carter, she said. Her voice was amplified, echoing through the bay. It was the voice of a ruler addressing a subject. You have answered the summons. Reed stepped forward, shaking off the guard's hand. He felt incredibly underdressed. Your Highness, he said. He tried to remember if he was supposed to bow. He settled for a nod. I did not realize the summons came with an armada. A text message would have been fine. The diplomats gasped. The Sarath guards stiffened, their hands drifting to the strange, curved weapons at their waists. But Elira's lips twitched, a ghost of a smile. The circumstances required emphasis, she said. She closed the distance between them. The cameras were rolling, dozens of drones hovering around the airlock, broadcasting this to billions of people. She stopped 2 feet from him. She raised her hand and placed it over her heart, then extended it toward him, palm up. In the sight of the stars, she recited, her voice formal and loud. The Dominion acknowledges the debt. Blood for blood, life for life. You stood when others fled. You held the line when the void threatened. Therefore, you are under the aegis. She looked him in the eye, her gaze intense. Do you accept the protection of the crown? Reed looked at her hand. He looked at the guards. He looked at the terrified human officials who were silently begging him to say yes. He stepped closer, lowering his voice so the microphones would not pick it up. Protection? He murmured. It feels a lot like kidnapping. Princess, your army is parking on my lawn. Elira leaned in. To the cameras, it looked like a ceremonial conferring of secrets. Please, she whispered. Her voice was barely a breath, stripped of the royal cadence. It is the only way. The factions in the Senate. They want to use this to declare war. They say humans are savages who tried to kill the air. I need you. Reed searched her face. He saw the exhaustion hidden behind the makeup. He saw the fear she was holding back. "You need a prop," he whispered back. "I need the man who saved my daughter," she hissed. "Lyra has not slept. She keeps asking for the brave human who smells like smoke and metal." The words hit Reed in the chest. Smoke and metal. It was such a specific, childish description. It broke through his cynicism. He looked at her hand again. "If I say no?" he asked. Lyra's eyes saddened. "Then you stay here, and when the political fallout hits, your own leaders will likely hand you over to the hardliners to save their own skins, or the assassins will finish the job they started." Reed looked back at Admiral Vance, who was standing by the airlock, looking at his watch. Lyra was right. He was a pawn. At least with her, he was a pawn who knew the Queen. He looked back at Lyra. "Is the kid okay?" he asked. "She is healing," Lyra said softly. "Because of you." Reed took a deep breath. He reached out and placed his hand in hers. Her skin was cool, but it warmed instantly at his touch. "I accept," he said aloud. Flashbulbs flared. The drone cameras zoomed in. The Sarath guards relaxed, though they still looked at him like he was a dangerous insect they would prefer to squash. Lyra closed her fingers around his hand. Her grip was strong. "Then let us depart," she said. She turned, pulling him with her toward the alien docking tube. "Wait!" a human diplomat shouted. "We need to discuss the terms of his—" "We will discuss terms when we are aboard," Lyra said without stopping. "The hero is tired." They walked into the membrane tunnel. The transition was instant. The air changed. It smelled sharper here, like ozone and rain. The floor under Reed's feet felt spongy, reacting to his weight. They reached the shuttle. It was a sleek, teardrop-shaped vessel that hovered slightly off the deck. The hatch dissolved, literally dissolved into mist to allow them entry. Reed stepped inside. The interior was unlike any ship he had ever seen. There were no chairs, only contoured recesses in the walls that looked like they were grown from coral. The lighting came from everywhere and nowhere, a soft, ambient glow. The moment the hatch reformed behind them, the formality dropped from Lyra's shoulders like a heavy cloak. She slumped slightly, letting out a long sigh. "By the void, I hate politics," she muttered. Reed looked around, wide-eyed. "Nice ride. Does it come with cup holders?" Before Lyra could answer, a small blur of motion shot out from behind one of the bulkheads. "Hero!" Reed barely had time to brace himself before Lyra launched herself at him. He caught her instinctively, stumbling back a step. She wrapped her small arms around his waist, burying her face in his ruined jacket. "You came!" she squealed. "I told Mother you would come! I told her!" Reed looked down. The little girl was wearing a miniature version of the royal armor, but she had abandoned her helmet. Her violet eyes were shining with pure joy. "Hey there, kid," Reed said, his voice softening. He patted her head awkwardly. "I heard you were looking for me." She looked up, beaming. "You smell like smoke," Reed chuckled. "Yeah, I need to change my laundry detergent." He looked up at Lyra. The princess was watching them. The hard warrior edge was gone from her face. Her expression was tender, vulnerable, and dangerously open. She looked at Reed not as a political symbol, but as the man holding her world in his arms. "Thank you," she said simply. Reed shifted Lyra to his hip, a move that felt surprisingly natural. "So, what happens now? I assume we are not just going for a joyride." Lyra's expression darkened. "Now, we go to the flagship, we face the High Council, and we try to prove that the attack was not just a human terrorist act, but a conspiracy that involves my own people." Reed raised an eyebrow. "Internal treason?" That sounds fun. And here I thought I was just here to wave at the cameras. You are here because you are the only witness who saw the device up close, Elira said, and because... She hesitated. Because, Reed pressed, because I do not trust anyone else with my daughter's life right now, she admitted quietly. Reed looked at Lara, who was busy examining a button on his jacket. He looked at the alien starscape projected on the shuttle walls. He was a hazard inspector. He fixed pipes. He avoided trouble. And now he was standing on an alien shuttle, holding a princess's daughter, about to fly into the heart of an interstellar empire to solve a conspiracy. Reed let out a long breath. Okay, he said. Let's go save the galaxy. But I am serious about the laundry. I need a new shirt. Elira laughed. It was a genuine musical sound that made the strange alien shuttle feel a little less terrifying. We will find you a shirt, Reed Carter. She gestured to one of the organic seats. Please, sit. The gravity transition can be disorienting for your species. Reed moved to sit, but he misjudged the low, sweeping arch of the ceiling structure. He bonked his head on a bioluminescent strut with a hollow thud. Ow! Lyra giggled, covering her mouth with her hand. The hero is clumsy. Reed rubbed his head, grinning at her. It is a tactical maneuver, kid. Confuse the enemy. Elira smiled, shaking her head. The shuttle lifted. Reed felt the stomach-churning sensation of artificial gravity shifting. Through the viewport, he watched the docking bay of the human station fall away. He saw the blue curve of Earth receding. He was leaving everything he knew. He was leaving his quiet, safe, broken life. He looked at Elira, who was strapping herself in opposite him, her eyes fixed on his face. He looked at Lara, who was still holding his hand. For the first time in 3 years, the crushing weight of failure in his chest felt a little lighter. The shuttle accelerated, flashing toward the massive, pulsing heart of the flagship. Reed Carter leaned back, closing his eyes, and let the current take him. The first 48 hours aboard the Serath flagship, the voice of silence, were less like being a guest and more like being a virus in a very large, very complicated immune system. Reed Carter walked down the primary corridor of the diplomatic deck, his boots making no sound on the floor. The floor was the problem. It felt slightly spongy, like walking on high-density muscle tissue. Every time he took a step, the bioluminescent veins running through the pearlescent walls pulsed brighter, tracking his movement. The ship was alive, not in the metaphorical sense of a well-oiled machine, but literally. It breathed. The air smelled of ozone and petrichor, scrubbed by organic filters that Reed tried very hard not to think about. He stopped, narrowing his eyes at a bulkhead door that refused to open. I am telling you, he said to the wall. I just want to go to the mess hall. I am hungry. The wall rippled, turning a soft, confused shade of lavender, but the door remained shut. Allow me. A deep voice rumbled from behind him. Reed turned. Looming over him was Kyle. The Serath commander was 7 feet of armored stoicism. His skin was the color of a thunderhead, dark gray and shifting, and his eyes were burning coals of gold. He wore the heavy chitinous armor of the Praetorian Guard, which made him look like a bipedal tank designed by an artist with a fixation on beetles. Kale stepped forward. He did not touch the door panel. He simply exuded a low, thrumming sound from his throat, a sub-vocal command. The wall shuddered, recognized authority, and the membrane split open, revealing the corridor beyond. You have to assert dominance, Kale said, his voice flat. The vessel responds to intent, not pleading. Reed adjusted his jacket, which had been cleaned and repaired by small, scuttling maintenance drones that terrified him. I was not pleading. Space Knight, Reed muttered, stepping through. I was negotiating. We have unions on Earth for this kind of thing. If the door goes on strike, you do not yell at it. Kale followed him, his heavy tread shaking the floor slightly. I am not a knight, Kale corrected, as he had 6 times in the last hour. I am a Praetorian of the Third Circle, and unions are a concept of collective bargaining that implies weakness in leadership. Reed grinned. He liked Kale. The alien was humorless, literal, and terrifyingly efficient, which made him the perfect straight man. Whatever you say, big guy. Just keep the walls from eating me until I get a sandwich. They walked in silence for a moment, the ship humming around them. Kale's presence was a constant reminder of Reed's status. He was an honored guest, which was Serath code for high-value asset under heavy surveillance. Do not wander again, Carter, Kale said. The ship is adapting to your biology, but there are sectors that will view you as a pathogen. The digestion process is unpleasant. Reed stopped. Digestion? Kale looked at him, his golden eyes unblinking. It was a joke. I am attempting your human humor. Was it successful? Reed blinked, then let out a bark of laughter. Work on the delivery, Kale, but not bad. The briefing room was a cavernous space with walls made of transparent crystal, offering a dizzying view of the nebula the fleet was currently passing through. Elira stood by a floating holographic table, her back to the door. She was not wearing her armor today. She wore a gown of shifting liquid fabric that clung to her form, the color of deep ocean water. It made her look less like a warrior and more like the royalty she was, which, for some reason, made Reed more nervous. Ah, the hero arrives, she said, turning. Her tone was light, but Reed saw the tension in the set of her jaw. Reed walked in, Kale taking up a silent guard position by the door. Your Highness, Reed said, dipping his head. I see we are still using the H word. I thought we agreed on the guy who was in the neighborhood. Elira beckoned him closer. The hologram displayed a complex web of star systems and political factions. The Senate convenes in 3 days, she said, ignoring his deflection. You will be presented to the High Council. The narrative has been solidified. You are Reed Carter, a human of extraordinary valor who recognized the sanctity of the royal bloodline and acted without regard for his own life. She waved her hand, and a projection of Reed appeared, taller, more muscular, and with significantly better posture. You represent the potential for humans to rise above their primitive instincts, she continued, reciting the line with a distaste that suggested she had not written it. You are the symbol of interspecies goodwill. Reed stared at the heroic projection. That guy looks like he has never missed a credit payment in his life. I do not like him. You do not have to like him, Elira said, her eyes flashing. You have to be him. She stepped around the table, the liquid fabric swirling around her ankles. Reed, listen to me. The faction led by Counselor Vogt is pushing for a blockade of Earth. They are claiming the explosion was a state-sponsored assassination attempt. If we do not present you as a hero, as living proof that humanity is worth saving, Vogt will get his war. Reed looked from the hologram to Elira. He saw the desperation she was trying to hide. She was fighting a war on 2 fronts, one against the assassins, and one against her own government. So I am a prop, Reed said quietly, a poster boy to keep the fleets from firing. Elira stopped in front of him. The scent of her, something like ozone and crushed flowers, filled his head. You are the only reason my daughter is alive, she said fiercely. That is not a prop. That is the truth. But truth is not enough for the Senate. They need a story. Will you help me tell it? Reed looked into those amber eyes. He hated politics. He hated spotlights. But he remembered the shape of the shaped charge on the concourse. He remembered the feeling of the vacuum. I will wear the cape, princess, he said with a sigh. But I draw the line at tights. Elira smiled, a genuine, relieved expression that transformed her face. Thank you. The only time Reed felt truly at ease was with Lyra. The child was resilient in a way that only children could be. While the adults plotted the fate of civilizations, Lyra just wanted to play. They were in the zero-gravity therapy deck. It was a spherical room with padded walls, the gravity nulled to allow for accelerated tissue regeneration. For Lyra, it was a playground. Catch me! Hero! She shrieked, kicking off the wall and tumbling through the air like a chaotic spinning top. Reed pushed off the opposite wall, drifting after her. I am coming for you, space gremlin. He caught her mid-spin, swinging her around. She giggled, the sound bright and infectious. Her lung was fully healed thanks to the Serath biotech, but she still had nightmares. Reed knew the look. He saw it when she paused sometimes, staring at nothing. So he kept her moving. He taught her Earth games. Okay, this one is called red light. Green light, he explained, floating upside down. But since we are floating, we will call it red star. Green star. Lyra floated cross-legged, listening intently. And if I move on red star, then the tickle monster attacks, Reed warned, wiggling his fingers. She laughed, her violet eyes scrunching up. Watch this. Reed, she said. She closed her eyes and hummed a high, clear note. The walls of the room responded. The bioluminescence shifted from white to a swirling pattern of pink and blue, dancing in time with her voice. She waved her hands, and the light seemed to detach from the walls, floating in the air like glowing dust motes. Whoa, Reed whispered, reaching out to touch a mote of light. It felt warm. That is a neat trick, kid. Mother says I am strong in the song, Lyra said proudly, opening her eyes. One day I will fly the big ships. Reed smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. She was a child of the stars, wielding power he could barely comprehend. And yet, she was just a kid showing off her drawing. The door hissed open. Elira floated in, gripping the handholds with practiced grace. She watched them for a moment, her expression unreadable. You are good with her, she said softly. Reed righted himself, grabbing a handle. She is easy to get along with. She does not ask me about trade tariffs. Elira drifted closer, her gaze lingering on Reed's hands, rough, scarred, looking starkly alien against the smooth pearl white of the ship. Kale tells me you make jokes about everything, she said. But with her, you are different, Reed shrugged, feeling self-conscious. Kids are honest, adults are complicated. I prefer honest. Elira reached out, her hand hovering near his arm. The light from Lyra's song reflected in her eyes. You have scars, she noted, looking at a jagged white line on his forearm. Not from the explosion. Older Chicago, Reed said, his voice tight. A fire. A long time ago. She looked at him, really looked at him, with that intense curiosity that made his skin prickle. You carry much pain, Reed Carter, yet you use it to shield others? It is a rare quality. Among my people, pain is considered a weakness to be purged. Maybe that is why I am a hero. Reed deflected with a grin. I am just too stubborn to purge the bad stuff. Elira did not smile. She looked like she wanted to say something else, something dangerous. But Lara crashed into her, wrapping her arms around her mother's neck. Mother, did you see the lights? I saw. My heart, Elira whispered, burying her face in the child's hair. I saw. The accident happened 2 nights later. Reed was in the tactical simulation lab with Elira. She insisted he learn the basics of Sarath defensive tech, personal shielding and comms integration in case the assassins struck again. It is a neural interface, Elira explained, holding out a silver headset. It links your sensory cortex to the ship's defensive grid. It will allow you to see threats before they happen. Reed took the headset. It felt warm. Is this going to fry my brain? Only if you resist, she said. Relax. Accept the link. Reed put it on. Elira donned hers. Connect. She commanded the system. The world dissolved. It was not supposed to happen like that. The system glitched, a feedback loop caused by the incompatibility of human neural pathways with Sarath biotech. Instead of a tactical overlay, the dampeners failed. Reed was slammed into a hurricane of white light, but it was not light. It was memory. He was not in the lab. He was small. He was cold. He was walking through a hall of endless jagged crystal. The air sang with a high, piercing note that hurt his ears. He looked down at his hands. They were thin, pale, glowing with faint geometric patterns. Loneliness. A crushing, suffocating loneliness. He felt the weight of a crown that was too heavy. He felt the eyes of thousands watching him, waiting for a mistake. He felt the fear of a young girl who was told she was a goddess but felt like a prisoner. Elira. He was in her head. Then, the perspective slammed sideways. He was seeing himself, but from the outside. No, not from the outside. Through her eyes. He saw the rubble, the dust of Chicago. He felt the grit in his throat. He saw his own hands, bloody and raw, tearing at a concrete slab. He heard the crying, not Lyra's, but the other girl's, the one he failed. He felt Elira's shock as she processed his memory. She felt his panic. She felt the moment the crying stopped. She felt the self-loathing that had been eating him alive for 3 years, the conviction that he was poison to anyone he loved. Reed. The scream tore them apart. Reed ripped the headset off, falling to his knees, gasping for air. He was shaking violently. Across the room, Elira was slumped against a console, her hand pressed to her chest, her eyes wide and terrified. The silence in the room was heavy, thick with the echo of shared souls. Reed looked at her. He could not hide. She knew. She knew exactly how broken he was. Reed croaked. Elira stood up, stumbling slightly. She looked at him with a mixture of horror and profound sorrow. You blame yourself, she whispered, for the child in the stone. That is why you held Lyra. You were trying to save the ghost. Reed squeezed his eyes shut. Do not. You think you are cursed, she said, her voice trembling. You think you fail everyone. Reed stood up, anger flaring to cover the shame. Stay out of my head, princess. That was not part of the deal. He turned to leave, but she moved faster. She blocked his path. She did not touch him. She just stood there, breathing hard, her eyes searching his face. I saw your loneliness too, Reed said, his voice rough. That crystal palace. You were just a kid, and you were completely alone. Elira flinched. We are not so different. Reed Carter, she said softly. Both of us trapped by duty. Both of us afraid to lose. The air between them crackled. It was not the tech this time. It was the raw, undeniable magnetism of two people who had just seen each other naked, stripped of all defenses. Reed wanted to reach out. He wanted to pull her close, to comfort the lonely girl in the Crystal Palace. He saw the same desire in her eyes, a longing to heal the man with the bloody hands. I should go, Reed whispered. Elira stepped aside, but her gaze never left him. Go, she said, but you cannot hide from me anymore. The next day, the political reality came crashing back in. Reed was in the observation dome, staring at the swirling colors of hyperspace, trying to piece his brain back together. He heard voices raised in the corridor below. He moved to the grate, peering down. Elira was standing toe-to-toe with a tall, slender Sarath male wearing the elaborate robes of a high counselor. It is madness, Elira was saying, her voice ice-cold. You suggest we lie? I suggest we use the opportunity, the counselor hissed. The humans are unstable. The attack proves it. If we frame this as a human terrorist act, the Senate will authorize the annexation of the Sol system. We can impose order. We can ensure the safety of the air permanently. And enslave a species, Elira snapped. I will not allow it. You are soft, Elira, the counselor sneered. Your time among them has tainted your judgment. The human hero is a convenient fiction. Once the treaty is signed, we will dispose of him. Reed gripped the railing, his knuckles turning white. Elira stepped forward, her armor growing spikes on her shoulders, a physical manifestation of her rage. Touch him, Vogt, and I will dismantle your house stone by stone. The human is under the aegis, and he is under my protection. Vogt scoffed and swept out of the room. Reed pulled back into the shadows. Dispose of him. He felt a hand on his shoulder. He spun around. It was Kale. You heard, the Praetorian stated. Reed nodded. Yeah. Vogt seems charming. Kale handed Reed a data slate. We have a problem? The forensics on the explosive device came back. Reed took the slate. He scrolled through the alien text, which the translator rendered into English. Energy signatures, Reed muttered. Wait. He stopped, zooming in on a spectral analysis graph. This is not right, Reed said. Kale tilted his head. Explain. The Sarath security looked for energy output, Reed said, tapping the screen. But look at the residue. Chemical traces, ammonium nitrate. And here, polymorphic alloy dust. So, Reed said, his eyes narrowing. Ammonium nitrate is primitive human stuff. Old school. But the alloy, that is Sarath hull material. He looked up at Kale. It was a hybrid bomb. Human explosive filler inside a Sarath casing to amplify the blast. No human terrorist has access to Sarath alloys. And no Sarath would use chemical explosives unless they were trying to make it look like a human bomb. It is a frame job, Kale rumbled, his golden eyes darkening. Someone on your ship built the casing, Reed said, and someone on Earth supplied the powder. It is a partnership. We need to tell the princess, Kale said. No, Reed said. If we tell her in the open, Vogt will know we know. We need to prove it. I need access to the wreckage analysis, raw data. That is forbidden, Kyle said. No human may access the tactical archives. Reed looked at the Praetorian. Kale. They are going to use this to start a war, and they are going to kill the princess to do it. Are you a stickler for the rulebook, or are you her guard? Kale stared at him for a long beat. Then, he let out a low huff. Follow me, hero. Reed laid the data out on the table in Elira's private sanctum later that evening. Elira looked at the schematics, her face pale. A hybrid device, she whispered. My own people, conspiring with human extremists. It is the perfect cover, Reed said. The Sarath hardliners get their excuse to invade. The human conspirators probably get power in the new puppet government. Everyone wins, except the dead. She looked up at him. How did you see this? My best engineers missed it. Your engineers look for advanced tech, Reed said. I am a hazard inspector. I look for shortcuts. This bomb was a shortcut. It was sloppy. Elira let out a shaky breath, running a hand through her hair. It unraveled the complex braids, leaving her looking wild and exhausted. They are all around me, she said. Vogt, the Senate. Who can I trust? Reed stepped closer. You can trust Kale. And... He hesitated. You can trust me. Elira laughed, a bitter, sharp sound. A human mechanic. That is my army? Reed grinned. I am a very good mechanic. The humor faded from her face. She looked at him, the memory of the neural link surfacing in her eyes. Why? She asked. Reed blinked. Why what? Why do you do this? She demanded, her voice rising. You know they want to kill you. You know Vogt wants to turn you into a martyr or a corpse. You could have stayed on Earth. You could be hiding in your quarters. Why are you risking your life for a political mess that is not your problem? Reed looked at the floor, then at her. Because of the silence, he said. Elira frowned. The silence? In Chicago, Reed said quietly. After the building fell, there was this moment of total silence, and I knew I was the only one left who could do anything, and I failed. He took a step toward her. I carry that silence everywhere. Elira, it is loud, but when I grabbed Lyra, when I grabbed your daughter, the silence went away. He looked her dead in the eye. If I stop trying, then the kids I lost really do die for nothing. If I let them win, if I let them kill you or Lyra to start a war, then I am just the guy who failed again. I cannot be that guy. Elira stared at him. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. The anger in her face melted into something else, something raw and terrifyingly tender. Reed, she whispered. She closed the distance. The air in the room seemed to thicken, charged with the electricity of the ship and the pounding of their hearts. They were standing too close. Far too close for a princess and a guest. Far too close for a human and an alien. Reed could see the flecks of gold in her amber eyes. He could feel the heat radiating from her skin. He wanted to kiss her. The urge was so strong it knocked the wind out of him. It was not just attraction. It was a desperate need to anchor himself to the one person in the universe who understood the weight he carried. Elira's hand lifted. Her fingers trembled as they hovered inches from his jaw, tracing the line of the scar she had seen in the vision. You are not a failure, she breathed. You are the bravest soul I have ever known. Reed leaned into her hand. Just an inch. Elira's eyes drifted to his lips, her pupils dilated. She leaned in. Then, a chime sounded from the wall console, a harsh, rhythmic alert. Priority message from the High Senate. Session commences in 10 cycles. The sound shattered the moment like glass. Elira froze. She pulled back, her hand dropping to her side as if she had been burned. She took a step back, her face flushing a deep violet. She stammered. I have duties, the marriage contracts, the alliances. She was retreating behind the walls of her station. She was the princess again. Reed felt the loss physically, like a punch to the gut. He stepped back, putting his hands up in a surrender gesture. I know, he said, his voice raspy. I know. Elira looked at him, her eyes filled with frustration and longing. We cannot, she said, her voice sounding like she was convincing herself. It would destroy everything. Reed nodded. He forced a smile. It was the hardest thing he had ever done. Go save the Empire, Highness. I will be here fixing the pipes. Elira looked at him for one last, agonizing second. Then she turned and fled the room, leaving Reed standing alone in the dim light. He touched his jaw where her hand had almost been. He was still playing with fire, and God help him, he did not want to stop. The Sarath capital was not a planet. It was a ring of living crystal and metal, a halo of impossible engineering suspended in the gravity well of a gas giant that burned with a luminous, violet fire. Reed Carter stood on the observation deck of the Voice of Silence, his hands pressed against the transparent aluminum. Below him, the gas giant, which the translator identified as the Sovereign's Eye, churned with storms the size of continents. Above it, the capital city, Othala, stretched in a continuous loop, a shimmering ribbon of spires, domes, and docking bays that glowed with the same bioluminescent pulse as the ships. "It is beautiful, isn't it?" Elira asked, stepping up beside him. Reed blinked, trying to process the sheer scale of it. "It makes New York look like a model train set," he admitted. "And the view? You guys really committed to the mood lighting. It is like living inside a very expensive lava lamp." Elira smiled, though it did not reach her eyes. She was dressed in her full ceremonial regalia, a gown of white silk that seemed to flow like water, armored pauldrons of gold, and a high collar that framed her face like a cowl. She looked breathtaking. She also looked like she was marching to her execution. "We dock in 1 hour," she said. "The Senate is already in session. My advisors—" She paused, a flicker of irritation crossing her face. "My advisors have prepared a script. They want me to weep. They want me to present you as a miraculous savage who was tamed by the light of the Dominion." Reed snorted. "A miraculous savage? That is catchy. I might put that on my business card." "Be serious, Reed," she said, turning to him. Her amber eyes were dark with worry. "If the Senate does not buy this performance, Vogt will move for a vote of no confidence. He will argue that I am too weak to protect the air. And then he will authorize the blockade of Earth to secure the border." "So I need to be charming," Reed said, straightening his borrowed jacket. It was made of Sarath silk, dark and iridescent, cut to fit his broad shoulders. He felt like an imposter in it. "You need to be perfect," Elira corrected. "You need to be exactly what they want to see. A hero. A symbol. Not a man." Reed looked at her. He saw the way her hands were clenched at her sides. She hated this. She hated the lies, the pageantry, the manipulation. "I will do my best, Highness," he said softly. "But if they ask me to do a trick, I am charging extra." The Senate chamber was a sensory assault. It was a vast amphitheater carved from a single piece of acoustic stone, floating in the center of the city's governmental district. There were no seats. The senators, 300 of them, representing the great houses of the Dominion, stood on floating platforms that drifted through the air, arranging themselves by rank and influence. The air buzzed with a low, constant hum. It was not machinery. It was telepathy. The Sarath were a partially psychic race, and the collective mental weight of the assembly pressed against Reed's skull like a migraine. Reed stood on the central dais, exposed and small. Elira stood beside him, radiating power. "They say the human is dangerous," a voice whispered in Reed's head. "Look at his primitive structure. No carapace. Soft skin. Is it true they consume dead animal flesh?" Reed gritted his teeth, keeping his face impassive. He focused on a spot on the far wall. Elira raised her hand. The whispers died instantly. "High Counselors," she began, her voice amplified by the chamber's acoustics. "You have heard the rumors. You have seen the footage. Today, I bring you the truth." She gestured to Reed. "This is Reed Carter, a citizen of Earth, a man of no noble blood, No clan standing and no obligation to our throne. And yet, when the fire came, when the void threatened to consume the future of our dominion, he did not run. She stepped closer to him, placing a hand on his shoulder. It was a calculated move, a gesture of dominance and protection. But Reed felt the tremor in her fingers. He shielded my daughter with his own body, Elira declared. He gave his own breath to fill her lungs. He bled so that the line of Serath would not end. She looked up, her eyes blazing. You saved my child, she said. She was speaking to the Senate, but she was looking at him. The words hit Reed with the force of a physical blow. It was the same thing she had said on the concourse, raw and terrified. But here, in this hall of sharks, it was a weapon. She was using their shared trauma as a shield to protect her crown. Reed felt a strange mix of pride and violation. He was her hero. He was her evidence. A ripple of approval went through the chamber. Several platforms drifted lower, a sign of respect. He has the spirit of a warrior, one senator shouted. The Aegis honors courage, regardless of species. Another cried, but then a black platform rose from the shadows near the ceiling. It ascended until it hovered above Elira. Counselor Vogt stood upon it. He was tall, gaunt, and wore robes of deep crimson. It is a touching story. Highness, Vogt said. His voice was like grinding stones. We all rejoice that the heir lives, but let us not mistake a singular anomaly for a racial trait. Vogt pointed a long, gray finger at Reed. This human saved the child from a bomb planted by human extremists. His heroism does not absolve his species. It highlights their instability. They are chaotic, violent. If one human can save a life, 10,000 others can take it. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the hall. The telepathic buzzing returned, darker this time. Chaos, threat, containment. Therefore, Vogt continued, his voice rising, I propose that we honor this man by granting his world the safety of Serath oversight, a permanent peacekeeping fleet in their orbit, to protect them from themselves. Reed stiffened. Oversight, that was a polite word for occupation. Elira stepped in front of Reed, blocking Vogt's view. The human alliance is a sovereign power, she said coldly. We do not conquer allies. We do not imprison friends. Reed Carter is not a pet to be rewarded. He is a testament that we can stand together as equals. Equals, Vogt sneered. Look at him. Princess. He is fragile. He is fleeting. He is a curiosity. Do not let your gratitude cloud your judgment. Or is it something more than gratitude? The implication hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. Elira went rigid. I will pretend I did not hear that. Counselor, for your sake, she turned to the assembly. The hero is under the Aegis, she shouted. And Earth is under my protection. The session is adjourned. She swept off the dais, grabbing Reed's arm and dragging him toward the exit. Reed stumbled, struggling to keep up with her furious pace. He looked back once. Vogt was watching them, a small, satisfied smile playing on his thin lips. The reception that evening was worse than the Senate. It was held in the Grand Gallery, a hall with walls of flowing water. Reed was surrounded, nobles in shimmering silks and bio-armor pressed in on him, holding glasses of nectar that smelled like cinnamon and gasoline. They treated him like an exotic animal. Can you really not see in the ultraviolet spectrum? A duchess asked, leaning uncomfortably close. She reached out and touched Reed's cheek with a clawed finger. How do you find a mate in the dark? I use a flashlight, Reed deadpanned, pulling his head back. Do you have a mate? A young lord asked, circling him. I hear humans bond for life, like swans. Or is that a myth? Reed felt a headache forming behind his eyes. I am single, he said, and I am not really looking. Alira was across the room, surrounded by her own circle of sharks. She looked exhausted every few minutes. Her eyes would dart toward him, checking, before she was pulled back into conversation. Reed excused himself, pushing through the crowd toward a balcony. He needed air. He stepped out into the cool night. The gas giant filled the sky, casting a purple glow over the city. "Enjoying the party?" a voice asked. Reed turned. It was not Alira. It was a senator he recognized from the briefing files, Senator Chorus, one of Alira's key supporters. Reed leaned against the railing. "I have been poked, prodded, and asked if I shed my skin once a month. It is a blast." Chorus chuckled, sipping his drink. "They are curious. We do not see many of your kind this far out." He moved closer, his voice dropping. "You did well today, Carter. You stood tall. But—" Reed looked at him. "But? But the princess is walking a dangerous path," Chorus said. Vogt's words struck a nerve. "There are many who fear she is too emotional, too compromised by her affection for you." Reed stiffened. "Affection? She is grateful. I saved her kid." Chorus looked at him with pity. "In politics, perception is reality. If she continues to defend Earth so fiercely, she will lose the support of the moderate houses. My house included." Reed felt a chill that had nothing to do with the wind. "You are threatening to pull your support." "I am being pragmatic," Chorus said. "Tell her to compromise. Tell her to accept a limited blockade. If she does not, Vogt will remove her. And you, well, accidents happen to guests who overstay their welcome." Chorus patted Reed on the shoulder and walked back inside. Reed stood there, gripping the railing. They were cornering her. His wrist comp buzzed. He ignored it. It buzzed again. A sharp, urgent pattern. He looked down. It was not a notification. It was a direct text override. "The ones who tried to kill the child will strike again." Reed stared at the screen. The text scrolled. "Target is not only the princess. Target is the bond." Attached was a file. Reed tapped it. It opened a stream of encrypted comms logs. He saw names. He saw transfer orders. He saw General Zyraf, one of the High Command's top military leaders. And he saw the logo of a human corporation, Omni Systems, the same company that built the station cargo containers. Reed's blood ran cold. It was not just Vogt. The military was involved, and they were working with human profiteers. He needed to find Alira. Now. He found her in her private strategy room, dismissing her handmaidens. She looked ready to collapse. "We need to talk," Reed said, locking the door behind him. Alira turned, her eyes flashing. "I cannot do this right now." "Reed, Chorus just told me he is reconsidering his vote. I am losing control of the Senate." Reed walked over and slammed his wrist comp onto the table. "Forget the Senate. Look at this." Alira looked at the screen. Her eyes scanned the data. She went still. "General Zyraf," she whispered. "He controls the orbital defense grid. And Omni Systems," Reed added. "They provided the explosives. Alira. This isn't just political pressure, it is a coup. They are going to kill you. Blame it on a human terrorist plot. And then Zyraf takes the throne to restore order." "How did you get this?" she asked, looking at him. "Anonymous tip," Reed said. "Someone on your ship has a conscience. But the file is incomplete. It references a master plan stored in the Archive of Whispers." "The military archive," Alira said, her face paling. "It is a fortress. Biometric locks. DNA sequencing. Only bonded pairs of the High Command can enter the deep vaults." Reed looked at her. "Bonded pairs?" "Couples," she said. a flush rising in her cheeks. Genetic matches. It is a security measure to prevent a single rogue officer from accessing the Doomsday protocols. You need 2 heartbeats in perfect sync to open the door. Reed looked at the data, then at her. Can you get us in? Elira laughed, a brittle sound. Us? You are human. I am Sarath. We are not a pair. The sensors will reject us. Reed stepped closer. Is there a way to trick it? Elira hesitated. There is a resonance emitter, a device used for medical synchronization. If we wear it, if we focus, it might fool the sensors into thinking our biorhythms are aligned. But it requires physical contact, she said, her voice dropping. Sustained, intense. If we break focus, the security grid will incinerate us. Reed held her gaze. We have to know. Elira, if Xyraf is planning a strike, we are sitting ducks. Elira looked at the door, then back at him. She took a deep breath, the warrior mask sliding back into place. Meet me in the lower maintenance bay in 20 minutes. Wear dark clothes. The Archive of Whispers was a tomb of silent data, buried deep within the city's substructure. The air was cold and smelled of ozone. Reed and Elira moved through the shadows. They had bypassed the outer patrols using Elira's command codes, but the inner sanctum was different. They stood before a massive door made of black obsidian. In the center was a panel with 2 handprints, glowing with a faint red light. This is it, Elira whispered. She pulled a small circular device from her belt. It looked like a silver disc. She pressed it to her chest, right over her heart. It hummed, turning blue. She handed a second disc to Reed. Place this over your heart, she said. Reed unzipped his tactical vest and stuck the disc to his shirt. He felt a faint vibration against his ribs. Now, Elira said, her voice trembling slightly. Take my hand. Reed reached out, her fingers interlaced with his. Her skin was hot. Closer, she commanded. Reed stepped in. They were toe to toe. You have to match my breathing, she whispered. You have to clear your mind. The device will try to bridge our autonomic systems. It will feel strange. Okay, Reed said. I am ready. She nodded. Now. She placed her free hand on the door panel. Reed placed his hand on the other sensor. The world tilted. Reed gasped. It wasn't like the neural link. It wasn't memories. It was physical. He felt a sudden rhythmic thudding in his chest that wasn't his own. It was heavier, faster. Thump, 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 thump. It was her heart. He felt the air entering her lungs. He felt the adrenaline spiking in her blood. He felt the heat of her body as if it were his own skin. Focus. Reed, Elira hissed, her eyes squeezed shut. Reed closed his eyes. He listened to the rhythm. He forced his own breathing to slow, to catch the beat of hers. In, out, in, out. The device on his chest grew hot. The sensation was overwhelming. It was intimate in a way that made him dizzy. He could feel her fear, her determination, and beneath it all, a sharp, electric current of desire that she was trying desperately to suppress. The door hummed. The red light flickered, turning amber, sinking. A mechanical voice intoned. Analysis. Bonded pair detected. Reed squeezed her hand. He felt her squeeze back, hard enough to bruise. He leaned his forehead against hers, just like she had done on the concourse. Stay with me, he whispered. I am here. She breathed. The light turned green. Access granted. The massive doors hissed open. They stumbled inside, breaking contact. The connection snapped, leaving Reed reeling, his own heart hammering a frantic, lonely rhythm against his ribs. Elira leaned against the wall, gasping for air. She looked at him, her pupils blown wide, her chest heaving. Reed stared back. The air between them was electric. They had just shared a heartbeat. We need the data. Elira choked out. Right. Data. They moved to the central console. Elira's fingers flew across the holographic interface. Here, she said. Zyraf's personal logs. She downloaded the files to a data shard. I have it, she said. Let's go. They turned to leave, but the corridor outside echoed with the sound of heavy boots. Patrol, Reed hissed. He grabbed her hand and pulled her into a shadowed alcove, hidden behind a rack of server blades. They pressed themselves against the back wall. The space was tiny. Elira was pressed up against him, her body flush with his. Reed held his breath. He could hear the guards passing. Scan the sector. Energy spike detected. Reed looked down. Elira was looking up at him. They were trapped in the dark, adrenaline coursing through their veins, their bodies still humming from the sink. He could feel the warmth of her thighs against his. He could smell the scent of ozone and flowers. Her lips were parted, breaths coming in short, shallow gasps. The guards' footsteps faded. They were safe. Reed didn't move. Neither did she. Elira, he whispered. She looked at his mouth. The fear in her eyes was warring with something else, something hungry. She reached up, her hand tangling in the fabric of his jacket. She pulled him down. Reed met her halfway. He wanted this. He wanted to cross the line, to burn the treaties and the protocols. Their lips were millimeters apart. He could feel the ghost of her breath. Then, she stiffened. She shoved him back. No, she gasped. She turned away, pressing her hands to her face. We cannot. Do you not understand? Reed stumbled back, hitting the server rack. What? Elira, wait. Stop it, she hissed, spinning around. Her eyes were wild. You are a distraction. Reed, every time I look at you, I forget my duty. I forget that I am the shield of my people. Reed felt a flash of anger. Is that what I am? A distraction? Yes, she cried. You are chaos. You are a primitive, reckless human who thinks this is all a game. You do not understand the weight of this crown. Reed stepped forward, his voice low and dangerous. Do not talk to me about weight, princess. I carried the weight of a dead child for 3 years. I know exactly what failure costs. I cannot fail, she shouted, tears welling in her eyes. I cannot be the princess who fell in love with her pet. The word hung in the air. Pet. Reed went cold. Is that how you see me? He asked quietly. Elira froze. She realized what she had said. The regret on her face was instant, shattering her anger. Reed, no. I did not mean... You meant it, Reed said, stepping back. I am just a symbol, a prop, a pet. Reed, please. Target acquired. The mechanical voice came from the ceiling. Reed looked up. A security drone, a small black sphere with a glowing red eye, dropped from the shadows. Its weapon arm extended, charging a plasma bolt. It was aiming at Elira. Reed did not think. He did not weigh the insults. He moved down. He tackled Elira, slamming her to the metal floor. Zap. A bolt of superheated plasma scorched the air where she had been standing, striking the server rack and showering them in sparks. Reed rolled, covering her with his body. He felt the heat of the blast singe the back of his jacket. The drone adjusted its aim, tracking them on the floor. Reed scrambled, looking for a weapon. He had nothing. The drone fired again. Reed grabbed a loose metal panel from the floor debris and held it up. The bolt hit the panel, heating it instantly. Reed shouted in pain as the metal seared his hand. But he didn't let go. Get behind me, he roared. The drone prepared a third shot. This one would kill them. Suddenly, a massive shape slammed into the drone. A glaive made of energy sliced through the air, severing the drone in half. The machine sparked and crashed to the floor. Dead. Kyle stood over them, his armor smoking, his weapon humming. "I leave you alone for 1 hour." The Praetorian rumbled, "And you start a war in a closet." Reed dropped the hot metal panel, gasping. He looked down at Elira. She was staring up at him. She was safe. He was bleeding from a cut on his forehead, and his hand was burned, but she was safe. She reached up, touching his face. Her hand was shaking. "You saved me," she whispered. Again. Reed pulled away, sitting up. He nursed his burned hand. "Just doing my job, Highness. Protecting the asset." Kale knelt, examining the drone. He pried open the casing. "This was not a sentry unit," Kale said, his voice grave. "It has been reprogrammed." He looked at Reed, then at Elira. It was using high-level command codes, General Zyraf's codes. Elira sat up, her face pale. "He sent it to kill me?" "No," Kale said, pointing to the targeting log on the drone's exposed core. The primary target was not the princess. It was the pair. He turned the screen so they could see. "Target priority. Bonded pair. Eliminate connection." The room went silent. Reed looked at Elira. She was looking at the screen with horror. "They know," Reed said softly. "They know we are close." Elira looked at him. The fear in her eyes wasn't for herself anymore. It was for him. "They are not just trying to kill me to start a war," she whispered. "They are trying to kill us because we threaten the old order." She stood up, her legs unsteady. She looked at Reed, at his burned hand, his bloody forehead. "I almost got you killed," she said, her voice breaking. "Because I let you in. Because I wanted." She stopped. She closed her eyes. "Loving you is a death sentence," she whispered. Reed stood up. He ignored the pain in his hand. He ignored the sting of her words from before. "Then we better make it worth it," he said. He held out his uninjured hand. "We have the data. We have the proof. Let's burn them down." Elira looked at his hand. She looked at the destroyed drone. She looked at Kale, who nodded once, solemnly. She took Reed's hand. "Let us burn them down." She agreed. But as they walked out of the archive, Reed felt the tremor in her grip. She was a warrior princess. Yes. But she was also a woman who had just realized that the most dangerous thing in the galaxy wasn't a bomb or a drone. It was the way she felt about the human walking beside her, and she was terrified. The chaos began not with a bang, but with a flicker. Across the sprawling, luminous loop of the Serath capital, the lights died. The living bioluminescence that powered Othala, the heartbeat of the city, stuttered and went dark. In the sudden gloom, the only light came from the angry violet churning of the gas giant below. Then came the explosions. They were precision strikes. The planetary water filtration plant, the transit hub for the orbital gliders, the primary communication spire. Reed Carter watched from the window of his guest quarters on the flagship, his hands pressed against the glass. He saw the plumes of fire erupting across the city, silent in the vacuum but terrifying in their scale. "This is it," he whispered, beside him. The news feed on the wall screen, which was running on emergency backup power, screamed the narrative. Human terrorist cell activated, coordinated strikes on vital infrastructure, casualties in the thousands, and then the face of General Zyraf appeared. The Serath military commander looked grave, his golden eyes hard as flint. He wore the black armor of war. "Citizens of the Dominion," Zyraf's voice boomed. The attack on the princess at Earth was not an isolated incident. It was a prelude. We have welcomed a human into our heart, and in return, his kin have struck at our throat. The screen shifted. It showed a grainy, doctored video of Reed Carter handling the explosives on the concourse, edited to look like he was planting them, not dismantling the situation. Her Highness, Princess Alyra, has been compromised, Zyraf continued, his voice dripping with faux regret. Her judgment is clouded by an emotional entanglement with this human agent. She is unable to see the serpent in her bed. Therefore, for the safety of the heir and the stability of the Empire, I am enacting the emergency preservation protocols. Reed stepped back from the screen. He is taking over, Reed said. He is staging a coup and using me as the scapegoat. The door to his quarters hissed open. It was not Alyra. It was a squad of elite guards, wearing the insignia of Zyraf's personal legion. Reed Carter, the lead guard barked, leveling a pulse rifle at Reed's chest. You are being placed under protective custody. Protective? Reed raised his hands, his heart hammering against his ribs. This looks a lot like an arrest. It is for your own safety, the guard said, stepping forward to shackle Reed's wrists with magnetic cuffs. The populace is calling for your blood. They dragged him out. As they marched him through the corridors, Reed saw the ship had changed. The warm, pearlescent glow was gone, replaced by a harsh, red tactical lighting. The living walls looked bruised. He was not taken to the brig. He was taken to a containment cell in the deep hull, a room with no windows, only a single gravity-locked chair and a force field door. They shoved him in and sealed the barrier. Reed sat in the chair, the magnetic cuffs biting into his wrists. The silence of the room was oppressive. He closed his eyes, and the guilt came crashing down on him like a collapsing building. It was his fault. If he had just stayed on Earth, if he had not let Alyra drag him here, if he had not let himself get close to her. General Zyraf was right about one thing. Reed was the weakness. He was the lever they were using to pry Alyra from her throne. Because of him, her city was burning. Because of him, her people were dying. I destroy everything I touch. Reed whispered to the empty room. Just like Chicago, high above the city, in the royal palace. Princess Alyra paced the confines of her private chambers. The doors were sealed. 2 guards stood outside, loyal to the general. She was a prisoner in her own home. She watched the city burn through the viewport. She saw the riots starting in the lower districts, Sarath citizens attacking human embassies, burning effigies of Reed. The anger was manufactured, but the deaths were real. Alyra felt a scream building in her throat. She grabbed a vase of crystalline flowers and hurled it at the wall. It shattered with a sound like breaking ice. She had followed the rules. She had played the game. She had tried to be the perfect diplomat, the perfect mother, the perfect heir. And it had led to this. Her people manipulated into hatred, her daughter's savior branded a terrorist, and the man she cared for, locked away in the dark. She thought of Reed. She thought of the way he looked at her in the archive, terrified and hungry. She thought of his burned hand. Loving you is a death sentence. She froze. No. Following the rules was the death sentence. If she did nothing, Zyraf would execute Reed to appease the mob. Then he would force her to abdicate, or worse, marry him to consolidate power. Lyra would become a puppet. Alyra looked at the shattered crystal on the floor. She looked at her reflection in a shard. She did not see a princess. She saw a mother. She saw a woman who was done asking for permission. She moved to the far wall, behind a heavy tapestry depicting the first star. She ran her fingers along the stone molding until she found a hairline crack, a pressure plate she had not touched since she was a child hiding from her tutors. She pressed it. The stone groaned and slid back, revealing a dark, narrow passage, the servants' way. It bypassed the main corridors and the security checkpoints. It led to the ventilation shafts, and from there, to the lower docking clamps where the flagship was moored. Elira stripped off her ceremonial gown. It was too heavy, too loud. She wore only her undertunic and leggings, simple, functional, dark gray. She left her crown on the table. She stepped into the darkness. Reed had lost track of time. It might have been hours. It might have been days. The isolation was designed to break the mind. He was staring at the floor, counting the rivets, when the ventilation grate in the ceiling rattled. Reed looked up, tensing. The grate popped loose and clattered to the floor. A pair of legs swung down, followed by a body dropping gracefully into the cell. Reed stood up, backing away. The figure straightened up, brushing dust from their clothes. They turned. It was Elira. She looked like a wreck. Her hair was loose and tangled, her face was smudged with grease, and she was breathing hard. She was not wearing her armor. She was not wearing her crown. She looked smaller, human almost, and utterly fierce. Elira? Reed breathed. She looked at him. She saw the cuffs. She saw the despair in his eyes. Reed, she gasped. She crossed the small cell in 2 strides. She did not stop. She crashed into him, wrapping her arms around his neck, burying her face in his shoulder. Reed stood frozen for a second, stunned. Then, the reality of her, the heat, the smell of ozone and sweat, the trembling of her body against his, broke through his shock. He wrapped his shackled hands around her waist, pulling her closer, holding her as if she were the only solid thing in a dissolving world. "You are here," he whispered into her hair. "You are actually here." "I could not leave you," she said, her voice muffled by his shirt. "I could not let them take you." She pulled back, framing his face with her hands. Her eyes were searching his, frantic and bright. "They are saying you are a terrorist," she said. "They are saying I am a traitor. I saw—" Reed said, "Elira, you have to go back. If they find you here—" "I do not care," she cried. Her voice cracked. "I do not care about the throne. I do not care about the politics. I care that they are hurting you to get to me." Reed shook his head. "That is why you have to go. I am the liability, Elira. I am the weakness." "No," she said firmly. She reached into her boot and pulled out a small laser cutter. She grabbed his wrists. "Hold still." She worked the cutter over the magnetic cuffs. Sparks flew. "You are not a weakness," she said, her voice steady now. "When we were in the neural link, when I saw your memories, I did not just see your pain. Reed, I saw your love." The cuffs clicked and fell to the floor. Reed rubbed his wrists. "I saw how much you loved that child in Chicago," Elira said, looking up at him. "I saw how much you love Lyra. And—" She paused, her breath catching, "and I felt how much you wanted to love me but were too afraid to let yourself." Reed looked at her. He felt exposed, stripped raw. "Elira," he warned softly. "I cannot pretend anymore," she whispered. "I cannot pretend that this is just gratitude, or duty, or a political alliance." She stepped closer, invading his space, her warmth radiating against him. "I am terrified, Reed. I have spent my whole life being a symbol. I have never been just. Elira. But with you, I am just a woman who wants to survive." Reed felt the walls of his resolve crumbling. He looked at this alien princess who had crawled through ventilation shafts to break him out of jail. "I am scared too," he admitted, his voice rough. "I am terrified that if I love you, I will get you killed. I am terrified that I am cursed." "You are not cursed," she said fiercely. "You are just a man who keeps showing up." She reached up, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw, her thumb brushing his lip. "Show up for me, Reed. Please." Reed looked into her amber eyes and saw the end of his loneliness. He saw a defiance that matched his own. The world outside was burning. They were being hunted by an army. The timing was catastrophic, and that was exactly why it had to be now. "Screw the curse," Reed whispered. He leaned down and kissed her. It wasn't tentative, it wasn't polite. It was a collision. It was 3 weeks of fear and adrenaline and unspoken desire crashing together in a single moment. Elira made a small sound in her throat and melted into him, her hands tangling in his hair. Her skin felt electric against his, a hum of energy that made his nerves sing. Reed lifted her, pressing her against the cold metal wall of the cell. She wrapped her legs around his waist, pulling him closer, desperate to bridge the gap between their species. They moved together to the narrow cot in the corner. It was frantic at first, a desperate need to prove they were both alive, both there. Hands explored, mapping scars and ridges. Reed marveled at the texture of her skin, the way the bioluminescent patterns on her back flared brighter when he touched them. Elira traced the muscles of his back, fascinated by the heat of his human blood, the roughness of his hands. But then, the frantic energy broke, giving way to something slower, something tender. In the dim light of the cell, amidst the ruins of their reputations, they memorized each other. There were whispered confessions against skin. "I never thought I would feel this," Elira murmured, her head resting on his chest, listening to his heart. "I was raised to be a statue. Statues do not feel." "You are not a statue," Reed whispered, running his hand down the curve of her spine. "You are the most alive thing I have ever met." There were awkward moments, the clash of biology and culture that dissolved into quiet laughter. "Note to self," Reed murmured at one point. "Do not touch the glowing spots when you are surprised. It tickles." "It is a defense mechanism," Elira teased, nipping at his shoulder. "You are disarming my defenses." There were tears. When Elira kissed the burn on his hand, the one he got saving her from the drone, she wept silently. And when Reed held her, feeling the weight of the crown she had left behind, he let go of the ghost of the girl in Chicago. He realized he had room in his heart for the living, for that 1 hour. The galaxy didn't exist. There was no Senate, no general, no conspiracy. There was just Reed and Elira, choosing each other in the dark. They lay together in the quiet afterward, tangled in the rough prison blanket. The air in the cell felt charged, shifted. "So," Reed said, staring at the ceiling, "if we survive this, what happens? Do I become the royal consort? Do I get a sash?" Elira chuckled, a vibration against his ribs. "You would look terrible in a sash." She propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him. Her face was serious now. "If we survive," she said, "we change the rules. We stop letting fear dictate how we rule. We build a dominion where a Serath and a human can stand together without being called traitors." Reed reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her pointed ear. "That sounds like a lot of work," he said. "Love is work," she replied softly. "It cannot just be this, hiding in the dark. It has to be out there. It has to shape the world." Reed nodded. She was right. He couldn't go back to being a hazard inspector. and she couldn't go back to being a figurehead. "Okay," he said, sitting up. "Then we need a plan. How do we get out of here and stop a general who has the entire army on speed dial?" Elira sat up, wrapping the blanket around herself. "We have the data from the archive," she said. "The proof that Xyraf and Omni systems staged the attacks. But we cannot broadcast it," Reed said. "Xyraf controls the comms. He has locked down the network." Elira smiled, a wicked, sharp expression. "He locked down the military network. And the diplomatic network." Reed frowned. "Is there another network?" "There is the educational grid," she said. "The archives, the library systems. Who has access to those?" Elira's smile widened. "Children." The ventilation shaft was a tight squeeze. Reed crawled behind Kale, who was somehow moving his massive armored bulk through the ductwork with surprising silence. Elira was behind Reed. Kale had found them an hour after the escape. The Praetorian hadn't asked questions. He had simply looked at the two of them, disheveled, holding hands, and looking ready to fight God, and handed Reed a pulse pistol. "The plan is madness," Kale rumbled from ahead, using the nursery override to hijack the planetary broadcast nexus. "It is undignified. It is brilliant," Reed whispered back. "Nobody locks out a kid. It is a safety hazard." They reached a service hatch. Kale kicked it open, and they dropped into a maintenance corridor. Waiting for them, hidden in the shadows of a cleaning drone alcove, was Lyra. She was holding a data pad that was almost as big as she was. She looked furious. "You took too long," she hissed. "This hallway is boring. There are no windows." Reed grinned, crouching down. "Sorry, kid. Traffic was murder." "You got the goods." Lyra huffed and held up the pad. "I accessed the Grand Library like Mother said. I have the admin privileges for the History of the Stars channel." Elira knelt beside her daughter. "Lyra, this is very important. When we get to the Nexus, you have to upload the file Reed gives you. Can you do that?" Lyra nodded solemnly. "Is it a story?" Reed looked at Elira. "Yeah. Kid," Reed said. "It is the best story. It is the one where the bad guys lose. Let's move." Kyle ordered. "Xyraf's patrols are sweeping the sector." They moved. The target was the planetary broadcast nexus, a floating spire of crystal in the center of the ship's data core. It was an ocean of light. Bridges of suspended energy crossed vast chasms of processing nodes. It was beautiful, and it was crawling with guards. "Stay low," Reed commanded. They crept along the lower maintenance gantry. The Nexus spire was ahead, a pillar of pulsing white light. "We need to get to the central terminal," Elira whispered. Lyra tugged on Reed's sleeve. "I have to go to the bathroom." Reed froze. Kale let out a sound that might have been a groan. "Not now." "Kid," Reed whispered frantically. "Hold it. Be a hero. Heroes have bladders of steel. I am not a hero. I am 6. Lyra whispered, shouted. "Shh!" Elira hissed. A spotlight swept over them. "Intruders!" A voice roared from the bridge above. Kyle stood up, activating his energy glaive. "Run!" he bellowed. Chaos erupted. Pulse fire rained down from the upper walkways. Kyle deflected the shots with his glaive, a spinning wheel of death. Reed grabbed Lara and sprinted toward the terminal. Elira was right beside him, snatching a pistol from a fallen guard and firing with deadly accuracy. "Cover me!" Reed shouted. He reached the terminal. He grabbed Lyra's datapad and jammed a connection cable into the console. "Lyra, do the thing!" Lyra tapped the screen furiously. "I am bypassing the firewall. It is asking for a genre." "Pick non-fiction!" Reed screamed, ducking as a plasma bolt scorched the console. General Xyraf's voice echoed through the vast chamber. "Stop them! Kill the traitor!" At the far end of the bridge, The general himself appeared. He was flanked by a squad of heavy troopers. Aelira stood up, leveling her pistol. "It is over! Zyraf!" she shouted. "The truth is coming out!" Zyraf laughed. "Truth is written by the victors. Highness!" He signaled his troops. They opened fire. The air filled with searing light. Reed huddled over the console, shielding Lyra with his body. 90%, Lyra shouted. Reed looked up. Kyle was pinned down. Alyra was trading fire with 3 guards, moving with a fluid, lethal grace. She was a dancer of war, but she was outnumbered. Reed saw a trooper flanking her. "Alyra, left!" She spun, dropping the trooper, but it left her exposed to Zyraf. The general raised a heavy cannon. He wasn't aiming at Alyra. He was aiming at the console, at the child. Reed saw the barrel flare. Time slowed down. He saw the energy building in the cannon. He saw Lyra's face, illuminated by the upload bar. He saw Alyra turning, her eyes widening in horror as she realized she was too far away. Reed did not think. He did not weigh the odds. He moved. He threw himself across the console, covering Lyra completely. "No!" Alyra screamed. The blast hit. It slammed into Reed's back like a freight train. The impact threw him and Lyra off the console and onto the floor. Reed's vision went white. The pain was absolute, a searing, tearing fire that consumed his entire nervous system. He felt ribs crack. He smelled burning flesh. He hit the ground hard. Lyra scrambled out from under him, unhurt. "Reed!" she screamed. Reed tried to breathe, but his lungs were full of fire. He couldn't move his legs. "Upload complete," a computerized voice announced. Every screen in the Nexus and every screen on the ship and in the city below flashed white. Then the files began to play. The logs, the payments, the order to kill the child. But that wasn't what stopped the fighting. What stopped the fighting was the scream. Alyra fell to her knees across the bridge. She reached out toward Reed. Her psychic barriers, usually so tightly controlled, shattered. A shockwave of pure, unfiltered emotion exploded from her. It hit the neural net. It hit the minds of every Serath on the ship. It wasn't a sound. It was a feeling. It was grief. It was a love so fierce and terrified that it brought seasoned warriors to their knees. It was the memory of Reed holding her in the cell, the feeling of his heartbeat, the absolute devastation of watching him fall. It was a broadcast of her soul. Every soldier, every citizen, every conspirator felt it. They felt the truth of their bond, not a political arrangement, not a corruption, but a connection deeper than blood. They felt her heart breaking. General Zyraf lowered his weapon, staggering back, clutching his head as the psychic wave hit him. On the floor, Reed wheezed, blood bubbling past his lips. He looked at Lyra, who was crying over him. "Did we win?" he rasped. Darkness swarmed the edges of his vision. The last thing he felt was Alyra's mind crashing into a desperate, screaming plea for him to stay. Then, the silence took him. The broadcast did not cut to black. The upload Lyra had initiated, the one flagged as a priority educational override, seized every frequency in the Dominion and across the human alliance. But because the Nexus terminal had been damaged by the blast, the feed was raw and unedited. On one side of the screen, the data scrolled in cold, damning waterfalls of text. Transfer logs from Omni systems to General Zyraf's personal accounts. Schematics for the shaped charges used on the concourse, and the kill order for the princess's daughter signed by the general himself. On the other side of the screen was the live feed from the Nexus bridge. It showed the chaos of the firefight. It showed the smoking ruin of the console. And, in high-definition clarity, it showed Princess Alyra of the Serath Dominion on her knees, cradling a human man whose back was a ruin of scorched fabric and blood. Read, she begged, her voice echoing through the speakers of a billion devices. Stay, please. Stay, Reed coughed, a wet hacking sound. He gripped her arm, his knuckles white. I am still here, Highness, just taking a break. The image froze the galaxy. For weeks. The narrative had been about monsters and terrorists. Xyraf had painted humans as rabid animals and Alara as a weak, compromised ruler. But the image on the screen shattered the lie. There was no political maneuvering in the way Alara held him. There was no malice in the way Reed looked up at her, trying to smile through the pain. General Xyraf, standing at the end of the bridge, realized too late that the jamming signal had failed. He saw the red light of the active camera drone hovering above the wreckage. "Cut the feed!" he roared at his troopers. "Destroy the transmitters!" But the troopers hesitated. They looked at the data scrolling on their tactical displays, proof that their general had sold them out for profit. They looked at their princess, who was not hiding behind guards, but shielding a human with her own body. Alara looked up. She saw the drone. She saw the red light. She did not flinch. She did not wipe the tears from her face or the blood from her hands. She stared directly into the lens, her amber eyes burning with a terrifying intensity. "Look at him," she said. Her voice was not amplified by the room's acoustics, but by the sheer force of her will. It carried over the network, silencing the riots on the streets of the capital, silencing the war rooms on Earth. "You call him a terrorist," she said, her voice rising. "You call him a threat to our purity. But look at him. He is a man who threw himself into fire to save a child who is not his own. He is a man who has bled for a world that treats him like a curiosity." She stood up, keeping one hand on Reed's shoulder. She looked regal, despite the dirt and the desperation. "General Xyraf told you that my judgment was compromised by emotion," she continued. "He told you that feeling love for a human was a weakness that would destroy the empire." She took a breath, and for the first time in her life, she let the mask of the stoic princess fall away completely. "He is right," she declared. "I do love him." A collective gasp seemed to ripple through the unseen audience. "I love him not because he is a hero in a story," Alara said fiercely. "I love him because he is brave enough to be vulnerable. I love him because he knows that true strength is not about never falling, but about who you are willing to catch when the world breaks." She pointed a trembling finger at Xyraf. "You think leadership is about invulnerability? General, you think power comes from hiding your heart and silencing your dissenters? You are wrong. That is not power. That is cowardice wrapped in armor." She turned back to the camera. "If loving a human makes me weak, then I do not want to be strong. If protecting the innocent destroys my image, then let it burn, because I would rather rule a ruin built on truth than an empire built on lies." She looked down at Reed. "This man is the best of us," she whispered. "And if we cannot see that, then we do not deserve to survive." The silence that followed was absolute. Then, the sound of a weapon charging broke the spell. Xyraf raised his heavy cannon. His face was twisted in a rictus of hate. "Enough of this sentimental rot," he snarled. "Kill them all," he fired, but the shot never landed. A wall of shimmering blue energy materialized between Xyraf and the princess. 3 of the heavy troopers had stepped forward, activating their personal shields. They stood with their backs to Alara, their weapons trained on their own general. "We stand with the Aegis," one trooper shouted. Mutiny spread like wildfire. Across the city, units that had been ordered to crack down on civilians lowered their weapons. On the flagship, Officers arrested their own commanders who tried to cut the feed. In the Nexus, Kale let out a roar of triumph. "For the true crown!" the Praetorian bellowed, charging across the bridge. A dozen loyalist soldiers surged in behind him, pouring from the maintenance shafts where they had been pinned down. They crashed into Zyraf's personal guard, a chaotic melee of energy blades and pulse fire. Illyra did not watch the battle. She dropped back to her knees beside Reed. "Reed," she whispered, pressing her hands over the wound on his back. "Help is coming. Kale is here." Reed blinked, his vision swimming. He looked past her, at the battle raging on the bridge. He grinned, his teeth stained with blood. "I think," he wheezed, "I think your speech worked. You should run for office." Illyra let out a sob that was half laugh. "You are an idiot. Do not speak. Save your strength." The battle shifted. Kyle and the Loyalists drove the conspirators back, but Zyraf was a force of nature. The general wielded a massive gravity hammer, smashing aside anyone who came near. He was carving a path toward them. He vaulted over the railing, landing on the central platform with a heavy thud that shook the floor. He loomed over Illyra and Reed, his golden eyes burning with madness. "You have ruined everything," he spat. "You have infected my legion with your weakness." Illyra stood up. She had no weapon. She had dropped the pistol to hold Reed. Zyraf raised the hammer. "I will crush your pet," he growled. "And then I will make you watch as I burn Earth to ash." Reed groaned, trying to push himself up. He managed to prop himself on one elbow, wincing as pain tore through him. "You know, General," Reed rasped, his voice thin but carrying in the sudden quiet of the immediate circle. Zyraf paused, looking down at the broken human. "You talk a lot about purity," Reed said, coughing. "But frankly, this place was getting a little stuffy. Maybe the Empire needed to be broken open. You know, to let some better light in." Zyraf sneered. "You die with a joke on your lips. Human." "Better than dying with a lie in my heart," Reed retorted. Zyraf roared and swung the hammer. Illyra moved. She did not block the strike. She stepped inside it. She caught the haft of the hammer with one hand, her gauntlet sparking as the gravity field ground against her palm. With her other hand, she struck Zyraf in the center of his chest plate. It was not a punch. It was a psychic lance. Zyraf gasped, staggering back. He dropped the hammer. Illyra did not let up. She advanced on him, her movements a blur of martial perfection. She struck his helmet, shattering the faceplate. She swept his legs, driving him to the ground. She stood over him, her hand raised, glowing with terrible violet energy. "Finish it!" Kyle shouted from the edge of the platform. "Kill the traitor!" Zyraf looked up, blood running from his nose. "Do it!" he wheezed. "Make me a martyr. Show them you are a killer too." Illyra's hand trembled. The rage in her was a physical thing. She wanted to unmake him. She wanted to burn him for every moment of pain he had caused Reed, for every threat against Lyra. But then she looked at the camera drone, still hovering, still broadcasting. She looked at Reed, who was watching her with steady, trusting eyes. "Transparency," she whispered, "not vengeance." She lowered her hand, placing it directly on Zyraf's forehead. "I will not kill you," she said, her voice cold and final. "I will show them what you are." She pushed. She did not use a psychic attack to destroy his mind. She used it to broadcast it. She ripped open his memories and projected them onto the Nexus screens. The world saw it all. They saw him taking bribes from the human corporation. They saw him mocking the soldiers who died for him. They saw his contempt for the Serath people, whom he called sheep to be herded. They saw his raw, naked greed. It was not a glorious death. It was a humiliation. It stripped him of his ideology, his dignity, and his power. Elira pulled her hand back. Zyraf slumped to the floor, weeping not from pain, but from the realization that he was utterly undone. "Take him away," Elira commanded. Guards rushed forward, dragging the sobbing general from the platform. Elira turned back to Reed. She fell to her knees, her strength finally failing her. "It is over," she whispered, smoothing the hair back from his forehead. "It is finally over." Reed reached up, his hand shaking, and took hers. "That was impressive," he murmured, his eyes fluttering closed. "Remind me never to make you mad. Stay with me." "Reed," she begged, panic rising in her voice again. "Medics!" "I am staying," Reed whispered. "I promised I would show up." His hand went limp in hers, but the faint, steady rhythm of his pulse beat against her fingers. The recovery took weeks. Reed spent the first week in a Bacta tank that smelled like mint and old socks. When he was finally decanted, he was stiff, scarred, and bored out of his mind. The political landscape had shifted faster than he healed. The broadcast had changed everything. The undeniable proof of the conspiracy had forced the resignation of the hardline cabinet on Earth and the dissolution of the corrupt Serath Senate factions. 3 weeks after the battle, a summit was held on the flagship. Reed sat in the back of the conference room, his arm in a sling. He wore a simple civilian suit, refusing the dress uniform the Serath had tried to give him. At the table, the new Earth ambassador and Elira sat opposite each other. But there was no tension. There were no threats. The Treaty of Othala was not a ceasefire. It was a partnership. Article 4, the ambassador read, "Mutual oversight of all military contractors, joint tribunal for cross-species crimes, and full transparency on all border movements." Elira nodded, agreed. "And I insist on the clause regarding educational exchange. We cannot fear what we understand." The ambassador looked at Reed. "Mr. Carter," he said, "the Serath High Command has offered you a commission, commander of the Joint Task Force. It is a high honor. The Alliance would also like to offer you a medal and a position as a specialized attaché." Reed stood up slowly. He walked to the table. He looked at the data pad with the offers. Titles, power, influence. "No, thank you," Reed said. The ambassador blinked. "Excuse me?" "I am not a soldier," Reed said, "and I am definitely not a diplomat. I do not have the patience for the meetings." He looked at Elira. She was smiling slightly, as if she knew exactly what he was going to say. "I want to be a liaison," Reed said, "but not for the governments, for the people. I want to set up a program for emergency response training, mixed teams, humans and Serath working together when things blow up. Because things always blow up, and when they do, nobody cares about treaties. They just care who is coming to help." Elira nodded. "A noble pursuit. The Crown approves." The ambassador looked confused but signed off on it. After the meeting, Reed walked Elira back to her quarters. The corridors were busy now, but the fear was gone. Serath crew members nodded to him with respect. Some even tried to mimic the human wave he had taught Lyra. "You turned down a lot of power today," Elira said quietly. Reed shrugged. "Power is heavy. I prefer a wrench. Besides, if I am a commander, I have to follow orders. If I am a consultant, I can tell you when you are being stubborn." Elira stopped. She turned to him. "Am I stubborn?" Reed grinned. "You are the most stubborn person I have ever met. It is your best quality." The fallout from Elira's confession was messy, as real life always is. Several traditionalist houses resigned from the court in protest, claiming the bloodline had been tainted by her declaration of love for a primitive. Tabloid feeds on Earth ran wild with speculation about alien romance. But for every noble who turned their back, 1,000 young citizens stepped forward. They painted murals of the Nexus broadcast on the city walls. They wore badges with Reed's silhouette. They saw, for the first time, a leader who spoke to their hearts, not just their duty. Lyra, of course, was loving every minute of it. She was currently the center of attention in the royal nursery. "My human saved us twice," she announced to a group of wide-eyed Serath children. "He jumped on a bomb, and then he jumped on a laser. He is invincible." One of the children raised a hand. "Does he eat rocks?" "My father says humans eat rocks." Lyra rolled her eyes. "No, silly. He eats pizza. It is round and greasy and amazing." Reed, standing in the doorway with Elira, chuckled. "I am creating a monster," he whispered. Elira leaned against him. "She is happy. That is all that matters." She looked at him. "Are you happy, Reed?" Reed looked at the kids. He looked at the woman beside him, who had defied an empire for him. He touched the fresh scar on his chest, hidden under his shirt. "Yeah," he said, "I think I am." That evening, they stood on the private balcony of the royal suite. The gas giant was putting on a show, vast ribbons of violet and gold storm clouds churning in the deep atmosphere. The wind was cool, carrying the scent of rain from the hydroponic gardens. Elira leaned on the railing, her silk robe fluttering. Reed stood beside her, nursing a glass of earth whiskey that Kale had miraculously procured. "Do you regret it?" Elira asked suddenly. Reed looked at her. "Regret what? Getting shot?" "Yeah, that part sucked." "No," she said, turning to face him. "That day on the concourse, if you had walked away, you would still have your quiet life. You would not be scarred. You would not be the center of a galactic scandal." Reed took a sip of his drink. He looked out at the stars. He thought about his life before, the inspections, the silence of his empty apartment, the nightmares of Chicago. "And if I had walked away," he said slowly, "I would have been safe, but I would have been dead." He turned to her. "I was a ghost. Elira. I was just haunting my own life, saving Lyra. Saving you, it woke me up. It gave the pain somewhere to go." He set the glass down and took her hands. "You asked me once if I felt cursed. I do not feel cursed anymore. I feel lucky." Elira's eyes shone with tears. She squeezed his hands. "It will not be easy," she warned. "My people are traditional. Yours are fearful. We will be challenged every day. There will be insults. There will be threats. Let them come," Reed said. "We have faced armies, assassins, and a very angry general with a hammer. I think we can handle a few angry editorials." Elira smiled. It was the soft, private smile she saved just for him. "We are building a new world. Reed Carter. It is a terrifying responsibility." Reed pulled her closer, wrapping his good arm around her waist. "Then we better get started. But first, I believe you owe me a dance. I recall something about a diplomatic ball next week." Elira laughed. "You cannot dance. You possess the grace of a cargo lifter." Reed feigned offense. "I will have you know I took salsa lessons. I am a rhythmic machine." The epilogue of the story was not written in ink, but in moments. It was written in the Great Hall, 2 months later, during the ratification ceremony. Reed stood at the podium to give a short speech of thanks. He had practiced his Serath pronunciation for days. "Citizens," he began, intending to say, "I am honored by your welcome." Instead, he paused, mixed up the tonal inflection on the word welcome, and announced to the entire gathered assembly, "I am marinated by your gravy." There was a stunned silence. Then, Lyra, sitting on the throne, let out a snort of laughter she could not suppress. The sound broke the tension instantly. The dignitaries, seeing their princess laugh, began to chuckle. Soon, the entire hall was roaring. Reed stood there, red-faced. "You did that on purpose." He projected his thought, a trick he was learning from the neural link training. "I did not." Lyra's voice echoed in his head, rich with amusement. But it was adorable. "You are definitely marinated." It was written in the official portrait session. The royal painter was trying to arrange Lyra and Lyra in a traditional pose of stoic nobility. "No." Lyra stamped her foot. "My two parents." She grabbed Reed's hand and dragged him into the frame. "Kid, I am not really." "Royal portrait material," Reed tried to argue. "You are my hero," Lyra insisted. "You stay." She made him stand next to Lyra. Then, just as the painter activated the capture drone, she crossed her eyes and stuck out her tongue. The resulting image, Reed looking confused, Lyra looking lovingly at him, and Lyra making a face, became the most downloaded image in the history of the Dominion. It was scandalous, it was undignified, and it was loved. And finally, it was written in the quiet. Late at night, the flagship orbited Earth, flying in formation with a human alliance carrier. Shuttles moved back and forth between them, carrying mixed crews of medics and engineers, Reed's new task force. In the royal quarters, the lights were dim. Reed and Lyra sat on the edge of Lyra's bed. The child was fast asleep, clutching a stuffed bear that Reed had bought her from a gift shop in New York. They watched her chest rise and fall. The rhythm was steady, peaceful. Lyra leaned her head on Reed's shoulder. He wrapped his arm around her, his hand resting on her arm where the armor usually sat. "Every time I look at her," Lyra whispered, "I remember the concourse. I remember the smoke. I remember you refusing to let her go." Reed looked at the sleeping girl. He remembered the count. 1, 2, 3, 4. "You said I saved your child," Reed murmured. Lyra looked up at him. "You did." Reed shook his head slowly. "No. Lyra, you do not get it. When I heard her breathe again, when I saw your eyes," he kissed her forehead. "She saved me. She saved me from a life where love and courage were always losing battles." Lyra turned in his arms, resting her forehead against his. "Then we are even," she whispered. Outside, the stars burned cold and distant in the void. But inside the room, there was warmth. There was the soft breathing of a child who would grow up in a world her parents were building for her. Reed Carter and Princess Lyra sat together in the dark, two lonely souls who had found each other in the wreckage. And as they watched their daughter sleep, they knew that the general was wrong. The empire had not been destroyed by their weakness. It had been reborn by their strength. And all it took was one brave act to change the fate of the stars.